want to introduce our last speaker of today, Don Bowman. He is a founder of Anglicus from Kitchener-Waterloo, and he's helping us a lot with the meetups over there. And another thing, he's one of the contributors to FluentD, and specifically to FluentD Helm charts, is doing a lot of changes there. So thanks a lot from the Kubernetes and CNCF community for doing this great job. So please welcome Don Bowman.
So security should be first and last, but we heard earlier is last. I'm going to sort of try to bring home what some of the last couple of speakers talked about. And I really believe in defense in depth. And there's two kinds of people, those that have been hacked and know it, and those that have been hacked. So I take the assumption, just a healthy bit of paranoia, put your tinfoil hat on every morning, just like everyone else. And we all think in terms of Boolean terms, outside bad, inside good. And I think about your skin. The skin is the firewall on your body. It's what keeps bad stuff out of your body. But if you get scratched, you don't die. The reason is your white blood cells go to work and they attack whatever's in there. Your body didn't assume that the skin would be perfect. So earlier there was a speaker that said, who here runs just a big firewall at the door and nothing else? And I saw one hand half go up, but then they were embarrassed. I think there's probably a few more out there. So if you start from the assumption that your defenses are already breached, it's not that they're going to be breached someday, they're already breached. You've done an import statement in Python or Node.js or something that was breached. You've run a container that's breached or something like that. Then you get to a better mode and you start to think about, okay, it's a set of layers. My goal is to slow down the attacker, to make it harder for them to do their job, rather than to try to have some perfect layer that they can't jump over. There's a lot of people that think that containers are a security model. They're not. Like, containers are a convenience to move software around and to package it, but it doesn't really provide any material security. So our goal is to delay and confuse the attacker, not to confuse things in our system which are just there for our convenience, and to recognize that bad software gets in. It gets in from our upstream. It gets in from our staff. People, they have some tooling on their desktop. They've done npm install-g of lint, and lint got attacked. It was a real thing, happened last summer. So it gets in there, it gets checked in. So what are we going to do? We're going to limit the blast radius. So first I'm going to talk about a few of the great lies, the things that are out there that we think, oh, well, at least we're secure in this area. We heard a lot about certificates and TLS and SSL. We all believe in those things. And we also heard about Istio and mutual TLS and all that stuff, but not everyone put their hand up for that. And here's one of the challenges you see in cloud architectures. It's super common to rip the SSL off of the door. So you got some sort of load balancer, ingress, it's got your certificate there, and everything's in the clear inside. I can see heads nodding. You're like, oh yeah, I know a guy that's got that problem. Not me, thank God. What about the rest? So you've got the east-west. You've got stuff inside your cloud which is not encrypted. It may have come in encrypted, but it's no longer encrypted. And that means the cloud provider can snoop on it. Other people that are running on the same machines that you're running on might be able to snoop on it if there's a problem with the SDN controller. I know it could never happen. Other things can happen. So what about the ingress to the service? This is something you need to think about. This is a threat you've created. You've taken what used to be an end-to-end security, and you've ended it one hop too early. I don't know, not all of you have done that. The second one is, everybody thinks about, I've got this huge ingress firewall, I spent a lot of hours, we've got IP tables rules and web application firewalls, and we bought the best of the best of the best. And then I said, well, what's your egress firewall strategy? And they're like, what? Why would you do that? Why would I stop myself from getting back to the internet? Well, it's because you're already infected and you don't want them to backhaul all that home, right? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. So that's actually not impossible. We heard earlier today about Calico, network policy. Be a great way to do it. Other strategies as well. But you want to think about this pod, what should it be allowed to contact? And if it's whatever else, I don't want it contacting it. I just want to know if it tries and kill it, shoot it in the head. So that's other pods, that's the internet. You might use different service accounts and mutual TLS, Istio. You might use network policy. Network policy is actually quite tricky to configure for this. It's easy to allow all or block all, but trying to get it right otherwise is pretty hard. What about the APIs? Kubernetes master. Has anyone ever snooped around in sort of the var run something, 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 a couple of files that did .crt? Anything that runs in there can talk to your Kubernetes master as a node. And maybe you don't want, maybe this pod isn't one that should be going back to the API. You think about, well, there's not that much interest in there, but maybe you can get to the secrets in that namespace, something else. So there's a lot of people that also think that private IP and NAT are a firewall. I see this a lot. My IP starts with a 10, it must be secure, right? There's no internet. It's just not true. So these are the primary tools. We want to be using the principle of least privilege. If it doesn't need it, take it away. If it doesn't need outbound internet access, take it away. So there's another great lie out there, which is complexity. Docker, I know we don't all use Docker, we use Rocket and other CRIs and so on, but Docker is really the main one people are using. And Docker, let's be honest, it's a bit of a security disaster, right? If you can run Docker, you're root on the machine, because you have to have access to the Docker socket. That allows you to basically do anything. You can create network namespaces, you can create C groups, you can attach things with GDB, you can do anything you want. And I've seen people do things that are perhaps short-sighted, but they mount the node's Docker socket into the pod because it's convenient. You see that for some CIs do that. They don't want to run Docker and Docker, so they're just like, I'll just do that. And then that's huge, because now you can use the introspection API to go east-west to the whole world. So the default mode of Docker is the containers are also root inside. And you see this a lot. You just do a from statement, you get some Docker layer from somewhere, you add a couple things, you go live with it, and the default user is root. And you're like, well, it shouldn't really matter because the container is a security layer, right? Except that it's not. So now, if there is an attack vector, it probably can do it inside that container. So tools exist to remove the privilege. So, capabilities, security context, and so on. But it seems to be an afterthought. People get it working wide open, and then maybe later come back to that. Maybe they should start with it completely locked down and start adding privileges until it works. I don't see why you would leave root and permissions inside a container. DevOps. So there's two kinds of people. There's those that have committed secrets to Git, and those that lie about committing secrets to Git, right? Because we all have done it, right? So there's a directory, you just did git add dot, git push. You're like, oh, that was unfortunate, wasn't it? Is there any way to revoke that? And then you're like, I wonder how quick they're going to find it. Probably not that, and then the bells start going off. Even if you protect it with something like SOPs, or the Kubernetes secrets are kind of weak as well. Secrets are better than nothing because they can be somewhat locked down. But let's be honest, base 64 wasn't in encryption 101 when any of us took it at school, right? And that's the encryption method that's in a Kubernetes secret by default. I know there's Vault, I know there's other tools. So you need to protect your secrets at rest and in motion. We talked earlier about cert manager. People don't think about this, but if you get the secret key of that service the cert manager created, then anybody can masquerade as that service as a man-in-the-middle attack. So you don't think about it because you didn't create that, but you did an ingress annotation, so of course it got created. And it's wandered around your system. Your staff might have access to it, your cloud admin might have access to it, etc. So these are trying to set the paranoia, the tinfoil hat phase, because remember, you've already been attacked, and now it's a question of whether you know it or not. So there's 8 simple steps. So I think that every organization should do a little bit from every category, rather than trying to nail one category to the bottom. Because you can always get better within a category. So the first one we just talked about in the last presentation, we're talking about Claire. That's the one I use. There's other scanners. One of the things a lot of people don't think about in the scanning is you scan it at a point in time. What the scan says is, at this point in time, I don't know of any vulnerabilities. But you need to rerun that scan continuously. But I also heard Alpine, and I don't know if anyone knows this, but Alpine always passes the scan. The reason it always passes the scan is they don't maintain a list of vulnerabilities for Alpine. So you get a false sense of security. Claire is always clean on Alpine, but it's not clean. The second one is making it simple. Simplicity. Make it simple for your team to manage secrets. Don't make them struggle to do it the right way. So we implemented something with SOPs and Google KMS and Customize to make it really easy so we can commit secrets safely. In fact, it's just as easy to do it the proper way. And the Git hooks generally prevent the bombs from getting in. Control what executes, we just heard that as well. I sign my thing, and then my OPA prevents unsigned things from running, it said. Controlling and encrypting communication. So you want to control what can communicate to what? Network policy. You want to talk about who's talking to who? Service mesh. Remove all unneeded privileges. So if you need some privilege, this is where the init container is for. You create an init container, it runs as root, it does a bunch of junk, it exits. It's in the same namespace. That junk will likely stick around, depending on what you had it doing, of course. Removing unneeded network abilities. Restricted RBAC. One of the other speakers said, have you created a service account for everything? Everybody's like, what? I'm assuming the Helm chart did that, right? I'm like, you didn't read your Helm chart? No, I just read Helm install. I'm like, oh, okay. Right. You should really look in those Helm charts, because they're actually, a lot of them are fundamentally evil inside of them. And it hides it because it's Helm install X. I got really mad. I installed Zookeeper when I was trying to do Kafka. And I looked at the image, I'm like, this is just some guy's private repo. So I contacted him, he's like, oh no, I did that for a course I taught 2.5 years ago. There's no updates for that. I'm like, this is the standard Zookeeper thing. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know why they're using that, that'd be foolish. Huh. That took 8 months to get that PR through Helm, and it was actually just accepted while we were sitting here today. So if you've installed Zookeeper from there, you're running whatever that training course was. And you want to log everything. You can't really go wrong with logging everything, but try to use structured data. So I hear a lot of nervous giggling in the audience because they're thinking, wow, I'm glad that guy on the stage has these problems. I've never had them personally, right? Yeah. So some of these scanning tools are dead simple. Claire, it's kind of abandonware, unfortunately, but it's actually pretty good. It just takes the database of known CVEs, you give it a Docker image, snoops through it, gives you a list. SNCC, great tool. NPM audit, if you're using Node.js, and the last thing in your build pipeline is an NPM audit, it's a huge waste, because it costs you literally nothing to run that. It's free. And it gives you that little output down there. And at least you can decide to do something about it. It's literally free. It takes 0 seconds. The problem is you got to keep running this. As long as that container's in production, this was a point in time, but somebody becomes aware of a vulnerability afterwards. Locking the pod. This is such a pain in the ass, right? Because you got everything working, your boss is on your back, why would I go back and sort of think about what privileges are in here, what can I remove? But do you really need to be writing inside the overlay FS? I did a quick snoop through Helm. How many Helm charts do you think remove or make read-only root file systems? There's none of them. Why? It's supposed to be a container, you're supposed to be able to shoot it in the head. Why on earth would you let it want to write into the root? But they do. And that makes it easier for an attacker. If an attacker comes along, they got to get a little bit of malware to write more malware so they can execute that. It's easier if you've got a writable file system. So why would you do that for them? And then, of course, the permissions. Why would you let them run as root? Oh, it's because we're binding to port 80. Well, don't bind to port 80. Bind to port 1024, or use capnet admin. Secrets management. So, it's a pain in the ass, right? Because you've got something like Postgres. You've got a simple system, front end, back end, database. And the back end needs to have a user and password to the database because it doesn't use the IAM and the RBAC. And okay, it's great. So it goes in as an environment variable, it comes from a secret, except the database, maybe they don't have hash passwords or something. Again, I know that would never happen to anyone in this room. It only happens to the people in the news every day. If you make it simple to make those secrets encrypted, and again, we use SOPs from Mozilla. If you're not using this is really a great tool. Makes it simple. You can actually check in your secrets. They become YAML or encrypted or JSON. They're automatically decrypted on the fly. We're using G Suite, Google KMS all the way through. So if I fire one of my staff or I get fired, I stop being able to read it. The keys rotate. It's literally simple. So it really makes it good. The network tools. So we talked a lot about network tools today. Service mesh. The main one that people are using is Istio. There are others. And network policy. Here's an example. That's a network policy that would block all egress. So if you make the assertion, I've got a bunch of pods running, and I know they don't access the internet, well, why wouldn't you just test that assertion and put that in there and see what happens? See if they still work. Sometimes there are things that are not really malicious, but you don't really want them. The cert manager presenter said, I don't really know how many people are running it. I'm not planning to put telemetry in there. But you'd be surprised how many packages you install that have telemetry in them. They're going back home, And that might not be overtly an issue for you until one day your customer's in a secure environment and they notice it, you spend time explaining it, or maybe it leaks information about a customer that you have that you didn't want leaked. Logging it. So yeah, I work on Fluentbit quite a bit. Hands up, Fluentbit, represent. Anyway, it's a great tool. Nice and light. If you can, use structured logging. You can go through and build regexes for everything, but let's be honest, that's not a lot of fun. It's really brittle. It breaks all the time. It uses a lot of performance. If you can, and you change the output format of your things to log in JSON, then it goes straight into Elasticsearch. It's so much better. It's so much simpler. And then you just have to add that very simple annotation, and boom, it's all in there. And then later, when something is found to be bad, because remember, we've made the assumption somebody's already in here, I'm just now trying to find them, you can answer the question about, well, what did they get, where did they go, what did we get wrong, because they're already in here. Helm and Tiller. All right, so yeah, Helm 3 is getting rid of Tiller, and yeah, that's a much better thing for security, but I gave up on Helm and I gave up on Tiller. And we went with Customize, which is another CNCF project. And the issue that I had with Tiller was as much about security as it was about functionality. It was hiding a bunch of stuff. We talked about it earlier in the operators. You know, there were charts that were trying to do very magic things, and ultimately they were breaking. And I decided to make those breaking things be overt. So one example, when we looked at the earlier demo with Kafka, I noticed the speaker did something very clever. Let me just change the number of replicas. Boom, look at that, it's working. But I noticed he didn't change the size of the PVC or the pod disruption budget, which are both immutable, which break. And Helm tried to work around that, but it always got it wrong, and it would break the pod disruption budget, and then boom, your Kafka would be unavailable. So I decided to make it explicit, and I think from a security standpoint, this makes it easier for me, because now it's harder to get it working, but you know exactly what you got. Unless you do GitOps, you can check in the output and then go live from it, which is what we saw Montreal doing. The best thing you can say about Customize is behavior-free, and all the RBAC is up to you. A lot of Helm charts do create a service account, not all do. In Customize, the loaded weapon is pointed at your foot, so now it's your fault if you get it wrong. Never assume a Helm chart is good. Like, if you don't read it and understand what's in it, you have no business deploying it. Just assume that it's full of scorpions and battery acid. So, just to finish up, you laugh, but I tell you, I bet you that there's several of us in this room have installed a virus via Helm. Like, I swear to God, that one of those things is going to be, all right, let me find all the PVCs, slurp it up, and send it home. Like, it's going to happen. So here's the checklist again. And again, I recommend just making sure you have a little bit from each of these categories. Scan your input software. Don't go live with it unless you've got some scan, and keep scanning it. Encrypt your secrets. Don't let them wander around your system in plain text. Even in the dev cluster. Get in a good habit. Make it simple so it's easy to do in dev and prod. We use 2 different PGP rings, 2 different KMS rings for that. Makes it very simple. Control what executes. So Binoth said, if you don't know where it came from, it's got no business running in your system. Control and encrypt your communications. Again, this is not overly difficult. You know, Istio is a little bit challenging to get going, but once you got it going, it's not too bad. You know, just mutating webhook, insert, yada, 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 sidecar. I just yada, yada, Istio. I'm trivializing what was a fair bit of work for my team. Remove unneeded privileges, unneeded network capabilities, restricted RBAC, you know, make sure there's a service count for everything so you can see who did what, and logging access control. So the conclusions. I used to always tell this joke, 2 hikers out, they see a bear, one bent over, ties shoes, what's the matter, you can't outrun a bear, I just need to outrun you. That's what security is all about. It's about outrunning your friend so that your friend gets attacked and not you. It sounds bad, it sounds evil, but all you have to do is be slightly faster than the next one, and the lazy attackers will go somewhere else. Think about risk as a defense. It's not a castle wall, it's trench warfare. It's about preventing them from, they're going to get some way, it's preventing them from getting all the way, and making them really muddy and dirty and so on when they get there. Reduce risk at each level, so each level make it, you know, less and less risky, so by the time they get through that, they're exhausted and they got nothing out of it. Starve and exhaust the attacker. Salted earth strategy here. Read-only file systems, no root, no ability to sniff traffic. It's all encrypted. It's a separate service account for everything. It makes it so hard that each one of those things isn't that strong, but the collection of them is unbelievably strong. And that, my friends, makes defense in depth.